Janani Sampath. I will be your host for today's session. Before we start, here are a few hygiene checks for a seamless virtual experience. Please close all other applications on your computer and log out from your organization's VPN to conserve internet bandwidth. Today, we have a lot lined up for you. We will have panelists that comprise HR leaders and DEI leaders, along with subject matter experts to discuss gender diversity and inclusion in the Gulf. As Avtar, in association with US-based Seramount, foray into Gulf with the one-of-a-kind gender analytics exercise Best Companies for Women in Gulf to raise the bar for practices and policies relating to women's recruitment, retention, and advancement, we are turning the spotlight on gender diversity in the workplaces in GCC. Beg your pardon for the slight technical gap. First on the agenda today, we have Anju G. Parvati, Vice President, Research and Solutions at Avtar, to share with us the details of the one-of-a-kind exercise, the Best Companies for Women in Gulf. So a little bit about Anju. She's been working across the length and breadth of DEI metrics for companies, and Anju and her team produces several strategic insights for corporate India. She leads corporate India's largest diversity analytics exercise, Avtar and Seramount, 100 Best Companies for Women in India and Most Inclusive Companies Index Studies. Helming the Best Companies for Women in Gulf, Anju will now take us through the highlights of the exercise that is now foraying into Gulf. In the meantime, you can drop your questions or doubts in the chat window and Anju will answer them for you. Over to you, Anju.
Thank you so much, Janani, for the very warm introduction. Very good afternoon, good evening, one and all. It's my pleasure to begin this segment before we listen to a lineup of stellar speakers, practitioners who are from GCC and understand the gender diversity narrative in depth. Happy to take you through the best companies for women in Gulf study. Just give me a moment as I bring up my screen. Janani, request your cue to confirm that my screen is visible.
Yes, Anju, it's visible. You can go in your slideshow mode. Yes, perfect.
Great. So the Best Companies for Women in Gulf, or BCWG, is the outcome of an association that has produced one of the world's largest diversity analytics studies so far. The two entities are Avtar and Seramount. Avtar is India's premier diversity, equity, and inclusion solutions firm. We are well known for the body of research that we have been conducting in the Indian geography for the past 23 years. We have been the pioneers for several diversity firsts in India, including the advent of career tracks or recruitment tracks for women on career breaks and creating exclusive diversity job portals and the diversity analytics study that the Gulf study is modeled of, which is the Best Companies for Women in India. We have been recognized by international bodies like the Stanford GSB, as also the Straits Times in Singapore, for our work towards influencing the gender diversity narrative in India, have been conducting and hosting the Best Companies for Women in India study for the past 8 years. So for the purpose of the study, both in India and in the Gulf region, we partner with this organization called the Seramount, which is a strategic professional services firm aimed at advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace based out of USA. Formerly called Working Mother Media, Seramount has a very influential clientele of top corporates, Fortune 500 organizations, and they have been running the Best Companies study in the US for the past 37 years. So that's the legacy of the study in the US, 37 years in the US, 8 years in India, and now for the very first time in the region of GCC. In terms of the areas that the study will cover, we have 7 segments across the length and breadth, to borrow Janani's terminology, right? In terms of the length and breadth of diversity matrices that we seek. Every company that is keen to apply to the study will fill in a standardized application form with questions across these 7 segments. We will have a workforce profile segment where we profile the gender diversity ratios, so the percentage of women across levels in the organization, the hiring ratios, attrition, promotion, etc. We look into policies and practices for recruitment, retention, advancement, for safety and security, which is, prevention of workplace sexual harassment and initiatives towards that. Support towards various formats of flexible working, including hybrid working, remote working, and flexi time. Initiatives for parental leave and benefits like maternity, paternity, and adoption leave, and other benefits associated with new parent support. Benefits and work-life programs comprising of benefit systems that your organization provides to your employees from an inclusion, well-being, and belongingness point of view. So that these include childcare, elder care, self-care support, reimbursement for professional pursuits of employees while they are working with you. So all of these programs fall under this head. And the final pillar, and the one that ensures that all of the other creates great diversity outcomes, is how a company demonstrates management accountability towards DEI, and how much is DEI embedded in the organizational DNA. So we have questions around how leadership demonstrates the commitment, the frequency of trainings, and the periodicity of trainings and sensitization programs for your workforce, and so on. Across these 7 segments, we have close to 150 questions for the GCC region, and the questionnaire is customized to the GCC context. In India, we have a slightly larger questionnaire with over 300 questions. So we have contextualized and customized it to the GCC context, and it's close to 150 metrics or data points that have to be collated across these segments. Some key highlights about the study: the participation is free for an aspiring company. The only criteria is that you should have operations across any of the regions that fall under GCC. If a company participates and it does not make it to the final listing, we will not name your participation. So there will be no naming and shaming. However, every company that participates will get a free scorecard indicating where it stands in the universe of applicants for that year. It will also have access to all extended opportunities, including the highly customized benchmarking reports. So through the benchmarking report, we hope to create the first ever consolidated diversity benchmarking platform for GCC, wherein organizations very keen to steepen their intent around DEI can get very granular and fine benchmarks. Strictly an employer exercise, so it is one single copy of the application form that is to be filled in by the HR or the DEI team. There are no employee surveys that we would run, no perceptual employee feedback involved. It is hard DEI metrics and data that is already available in the with the HR team that will be used for the application. As I mentioned, no perceptual employee surveys. Alphabetical listing of the best companies for women in Gulf is what we will follow. This is an ethos of the study we follow in India as well. So while individually every company will get a scorecard and it will know its ranking amongst the universe of applicants, the public listing will be alphabetical in nature. This is because just like every individual is on their own journey, every organization is also on their own path of DEI, and it's only fair to look at them as the best companies, the ones that are doing exceptional work and putting their best foot forward when it comes to including women and engaging with a diverse talent pool. The listing is expected to be pan-industry. We have applications and registrations from across industry verticals, and we are very, very excited about that. So that's quick snapshots in terms of benefits. As I mentioned, you will be able to access GCC's largest diversity benchmarking platform. Learn from the best in class companies. One of our biggest vision through the best companies for women in Gulf study is also to enable identifying best practices and showcasing them and sharing them and inspiring organizations to adopt certain best practices so that it becomes a more inclusive world. The application form in itself will help you create data rigor and discipline in monitoring your DEI matrices. So you will get to know what are those key matrices that should be part of your DEI dashboard. In the event that you emerge part of the winners listing, there is the associated positive employer branding as a diversity friendly company. So every company that wins and is part of the winning listing will also be provided winners collaterals, including winners logo and other media guidelines to brand themselves as a best company for women in Gulf 2023. Modalities, I'm not going to repeat them. Quick capture, all completed applications will be ranked. Every company, irrespective of whether they make it to the listing or not, will get that scorecard, but you have to submit the completed application. The scoring, the ranking, everything is strictly confidential to the top leadership at the company. The ranks are not to be revealed to your employee base nor in any other public platform. This is in the interest of protecting the confidentiality around the ranking, as the public listing is strictly alphabetical in nature. The process of participation is a three-step one. Reiterating, participation is free. So you begin with an expression of interest, which is the registration process. Once we receive your registration, which is a basic 10-question long questionnaire around your company and its profile in terms of its operations in GCC, we move you on to the confirmation stage, where there is a document that is signed, e-signed, which declares the confidentiality statements associated with the study. It also takes care of the entire modalities associated with the study. So all confidentiality clauses related to the data exchange between both parties involved, which is Avtar and Ceramount, and the organization participating, is taken care of through the stage. And once a company finishes signing the COP document, typically the CHRO or a senior HR official from the company has to sign off in any format. Once we receive the COP document, e-signed, we move you on to the application phase, which is the actual filling in of that 150 question long application form. The last date as we speak is December 31st, 2023. We have slightly extended the timelines, keeping in mind, the participation appetite in the GCC region. And so we will, the final application submission will have to be done through an online encrypted link. The credentials will be shared with the participating company's POC, the point of contact, once it moves to the application phase. However, we will also provide offline Excel copies with the participating company to enable you to collate data and information across different teams and verticals in your organization. These are the timelines we are looking at. July is when we launched the study for the Gulf region. December is what we are looking at to close applications for GCC. We hope to notify the winners by February 2024, and in April 2024, we will celebrate the winners at the first ever edition of the best practices of the best conference for the Gulf geography. That's it from my end, a quick rundown of the companies that featured in the US listing and in the India listing. That's it. Thank you. participants, for joining us. I won't take much time. There is a very interesting conversation lined up. I hand it back to Janani. And meanwhile, should you have any questions about the study or the modalities, happy to take them over the chat window. Over to you, Janani.
Thank you so much, Anju. We are sure that the audiences have a lot of their queries already answered. You can refer to the link I've shared in the chat window to know more about the best companies for women in Gulf. And as Anju said, if you have any questions, you can share them in the Q&A window and Anju will answer them for you. And now we have an interesting and a very informative panel discussion on best companies for women in Gulf, creating workplaces fostering gender equality and inclusivity. As Anju said earlier, we have a stellar panel here. So I'm very happy to welcome Abigail Cooper, Head of Quality, Continuous Improvement and Technical Training for Otis Gulf, Fellow of the Chartered Quality Institute, Chair of the Otis Women's Network for the Middle East, Chair of the ESG for the Gulf. She is passionate about quality and improvements as well as diversity in the workplace. She's working to ensure that Otis and we have been working to ensure that Otis is the employer of choice in Middle East due to changes and improvements they are putting in place through their ERGs. A warm welcome to you, Abigail. And next we have Premankur Das, CHRO, Robustrade, DMCC. We have a lot of panelists today who are donning multiple hats. Premankur Das is a highly regarded international motivator and life skill coach. He holds a firm belief that each individual harbors unique skills and untapped potential waiting to be nurtured and developed. With over 25 years of experience in the fields of consulting, managing, and training in human resources, corporate environments, and leadership, Premankur has honed his expertise. He is also a black belt in Lean Six Sigma, showcasing his proficiency in process improvement and problem solving. On top of his impressive accomplishments, he is a celebrated professional speaker and has graced esteemed platforms like Toastmasters and TEDx. His ability to inspire and motivate through his speeches has earned him widespread recognition. Then we have Dr. Reem Lebhar, Lead Sustainability and Women Empowerment at HBS Club GCC. She is Senior Advisor, Board of Executive and Advisory Team at the private office of H. Sheikh Zayed bin Ahmed Al Maktoum. Dr. Reem brings over 20 years of experience in strategy and digital transformation with a primary focus on public sector, tourism, and transportation, particularly in aviation. From strategy to execution and transformation, Dr. Reem has held key positions at renowned consulting firms like Accenture and Bain across the globe. Her work is characterized by a knack for driving impactful change and innovation. A warm welcome to you, Dr. Reem. Then we have Sheriza Bazari, DEIB, lead Etihad Airways. Sheriza is a mom, wife, and a seasoned HR professional with over 22 years of global experience. She's passionate about people development and specializes in diversity, inclusion, leadership, performance management, and employee management. She seamlessly integrates her people skills and knowledge into her multiple roles at work, home, and personal life. The moderator for the panel discussion is Mr. Karthik Ekambaram, Executive Vice President and Director, DEI Solutions, Avtar, a diversity and inclusion specialist who has completed several seminal projects successfully for various organizations. His experience in business analysis, talent strategy, and workforce diversity consulting. Karthik has devised flexible working policies and created diversity-ready workplaces for several Fortune 500 organizations. He has also co-authored several papers that have been published in journals of national and international repute. He has been conferred the Diversity Leadership Award by the World HRD Congress. So a warm welcome to all of you on this panel. And as the discussion happens, you can share your queries in the chat window. The panelists will have them answer for you. It is over to you, Karthik.
Yeah. Thank you, Janani. Thank you so much. A warm, happy evening to all those who have joined us here. Thanks a lot for your time. And a special thanks to our wonderful guest today. And I think Janani said it's a very powerful, power-packed panel. and people who are actually working in the space of DEI, just not our path and in alignment to the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We truly have a diverse panel today, not just in terms of the gender, it also in terms of what I think Dubai and UAE symbolizes the rich diversity in terms of people from multiple different countries being here. So we have Dr. Reem, a French Emirati here joining us, and Abigail Cooper. If I'm right, you're from UK, Abigail, and Premankur from India, and Sheriza from Malaysia. And so that's another very rich diversity that we are really seeing. And of course, the kind of companies as well, that is represented here. Premankur is from the beverages, and I think if I'm right, it's a lot of trading operations in different parts of the world, just not in UAE. Abigail, Otis, elevator manufacturing, a company, engineering projects company, and Sheriza into airlines. Again, a very rich diversity from the representation from different industries as well. So it's going to be very interesting conversation that we're really going to have today. And also another interesting mix, I think, Janani introduced people just not in the space of DI, but doing various other sort of roles in the respective organization. And therefore, that is another very interesting perspective that we're really going to have in this conversation. And you would have all known the basic context in which we are actually having this discussion today. It's basically the best companies for women in the Gulf that we are really looking at, conducting, and we launched a study in the Gulf. And this is actually in the backdrop of the study conducted in the US and India for close to 35 years. And we just thought this would be very an appropriate time because we see a very big change. And I would love to hear from the panel, and that's going to be the first question, a huge change and a momentum that is happening in the Gulf from the overall diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective. But we also see a big work, and I think a lot of work that is happening even from the government side, and Dr. Reem probably would also be talking a little about that in terms of how government is also very sort of invested and working with corporates like we have today in terms of promoting gender diversity, increasing more women in the workplace, and also people with determination. So there's a lot of work that is happening in the Gulf as well. So my opening sort of quest, rather than a question, is request for you to sort of state your views on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the Gulf, in specific to UAE as well. I would like Dr. Reem to start the discussion. State your thoughts, please, with respect to what is happening in the Gulf today at this particular point of time.
Thank you, Karthik, and thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you for having me with this wonderful panel. So, indeed, as you mentioned, I'm French Emirati, and most of my career was spent in consulting and aviation. And I decided to come back to the UAE in 2015 to help and support my own country. And I have to say, through my career, my definition of women empowerment, I don't like this expression, by the way, changed over time. So I shared a few stories about myself earlier, and I mentioned that before I was in big consultancy group, and in Europe, being a senior manager or being a principal, we are taught basically to dress like a man, to talk like a man, to act like a man, to showcase our seniority and some kind of a seriousness to the customers. While when I came back to the UAE, I'm still wearing black because we were called the men in black in Europe. I'm still wearing black because I wear an abaya, but still I have my femininity side that I can showcase without being shy or without basically hiding the fact that I'm a woman, because we have such a wonderful leadership here in the UAE. The women are pushed by the highest level here in the country. So His Highness, the Prime Minister, Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, or the President of the UAE, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, do not hide their support to women. Women empowerment is a big topic in the UAE. We understand clearly the impact on the economics that women can bring to the table, right? It's a workforce that can't make a change. And clearly the government here is extremely supportive. So this is why we have a lot of policies that have been pushed by the government, for example, in terms of quotas regarding female to be represented in boards, to push basically even further the work and the support to women leadership. So each organization really is pushed to do the change and to be more inclusive, to support the women around the 4M, as I like to call them. So marriage, motherhood, maternity, and menopause as well. It's also a topic that we need to address. And for example, in the UAE, we have a phenomena that you can have also in India where women disappear after marriage, right? Because they want to focus on the family, they want to focus on the husband, they want to focus on having children. So now we have a lot of conversation around how we can support those young female to still have a fit somehow in the workplace without completely disappearing, right? Because you can be outdated very, very quickly, right? Especially in technology space. So the idea is how we keep them still part of the workforce. So whenever they are ready to come back to work, they don't have so much gap with their male colleague, for example. So the idea is really now to push our organization here in the UAE to create new framework and to change the policies. We need to remember that most of the policies have been created during a time where it was done by men for men. So this is how societies usually are designed. And now that women are coming strongly within the society, within the work space, we need to reshuffle and shift and adapt a little bit the workplace to give a proper space to women.
Yeah, thank you, Reem. I think we'll get an opportunity to discuss more in terms of how you are working with the government and what is government doing in terms of specifically the 4Ms that you spoke about, Dr. Reem. Right, and thanks for setting. I think, as I said, there is a lot of work that is happening, just not in the private sector. I think the corporates, but I think there is also a lot of focus that is from the government in terms of ensuring that the region and the country in specific is much more welcoming, much more inclusive. And Dr. Reem will also be very interested to learn that what could be diversity, equity, and inclusion specifically within the context of the UAE. When you talk about women's empowerment, and what is specific, how it is different to different geographies. Would love to hear from you, Dr. Reem. We'll come back to you on that. So, Abigail, would love to hear from you. I think if you moved to Dubai 2 years back, if I remember correctly, and your opening thoughts with respect to your experiences, diversity, equity, inclusion, having worked in different parts of the world. How do you see this, Abigail?
Yeah, so thank you for inviting me on this esteemed panel. I'm really honoured to be here to represent my company, also Otis Elevators, that do a lot of work in DEI. So yes, you're correct. I moved from the UK actually March 2022, so I'm coming up on almost 2 years in Dubai, and my role covers the Gulf. And Gulf to us excludes Saudi and Bahrain. But you're correct. I set up a women's group in Otis for the Middle East because we're very underrepresented females in our company in this region. My time in DEI, actually, I've worked in local government in the UK for over 20 years. And then I worked for Rolls-Royce, so I've worked in the aviation sector as well. And in all of those spaces, I've been involved in DEI. When I joined Otis UK 4 years ago, I was again involved in employee resource groups. And then when I moved to Otis Gulf last year, for me, in my company, the ERGs were not present. Again, I found it very surprising that there were very few women. We're very underrepresented with females, taking the whole workforce in the Middle East into consideration. But particularly, I've always been involved in STEM. And many of my colleagues in this part of the world were not aware of STEM, they were not aware of employee resource groups, and our entire company gets, very well served with communications. So I figured, okay, what's different here? Either they're not reading the communications or they're not understanding what it means. I figured I was in a good place to bring all of that to the region from my background, my experience. And it's just been like people have just taken to it and they lap it up, They were very pleased with the Women's Network that I created last year. We've done a lot of work, but I do think we have a long way to go. I love the region. I love the differences that we're seeing. The speed of change, I think, is consistent. I don't think it needs to be too fast. As I've mentioned before, we have to take men with us, especially when we're focusing on gender. I don't want my women's network to totally focus on women. We have to take men with us on the journey. They're all part of this diverse workforce that we want to create. I totally agree with Dr. Reem. The comment she made when we were prepping for this session is that we are not in competition with men. We are all special in our own right, and we all have skills to bring. And I think working together, working with, the governments in this part of the world, I think we are really in a good space to make some changes in a consistent, well-paced manner that brings everybody to the table and helps people to be their best. So I see huge opportunities for the region, and everybody seems welcoming on those changes. So let's do it.
Thank you, Abigail, for a very, very positive note. And I'm sure the region is very welcoming. Otherwise, we can't have some 150, 160 nationalities all working, thriving, I would say, and therefore that the overall, somewhere down the line, there has to be this ethos of appreciating the entire aspect of diversity that brings in, and also the inclusion part of it, right? Otherwise, it would not be possible to have so many people from different parts of the world working and having the living there, Abigail. I like what you said. I think that is something that we may get to speak about. We always talk about how much is good enough, right? But I think you added one more component to it. How fast is good enough, right? So do you really want to drive this change quicker, or do you really want to sort of pace it out nicely where you're able to include, set the right kind of an infrastructure, ensure there's a good culture that is built in, which is acceptability, greater understanding, and therefore you do it, you don't rush into things. I think that could be another thing that companies really have to look at when you are embarking on a transformation, a cultural change. How fast and how much you really want to do is another very interesting point that you brought in, Abigail. I'm now going to Professor Premankur. Your thoughts, please, on what you see as the critical aspect of DEI in the Gulf, Premankur, according to you.
Thank you, first of all, to Avtar. Thank you, Mr. Karthik, and greetings to all the panelists. It's really an opportunity for me to add my values or maybe my thoughts into this wonderful discussion. And I'm sure, we would look forward to the ultimate, conclusion which we would be making. And I'm also thankful to all the participants who have also joined. First of all, I must say that it's really an opportunity to work in this diverse geography, because as we were discussing somewhere, that Dubai is a melting pot of culture. So in an evolving landscape like Dubai, where we have people from different nationalities, and I can give my example that we are Robustrade is an international conglomerate where we have basically people from different background of nationality, different ethnicity, different sexual orientation people are working here. So that itself is making a wonderful example of diversity. So particularly our organization is not only limited in UAE and Dubai, we are also having our branches in Africa. So we are representing in 11 West African countries. So with multicultural ethnicity, multicultural culture, it is definitely a melting pot. But what is really important in my view is diversity gives you more opportunity, because more we have diversity, more we have innovations, because that is what I always have been seeing. Because as the CHRO, when we are trying to set our KPI, we always want to work on that how exactly we can tell people to bring in the diverse talents from different zones. So whenever I have my team meeting, I always have been telling people that how you can bring in people from the different areas and different backgrounds. Of course, we can always find that new challenges, but then with challenges, always we find new solutions. So this DEI itself is a new topic. It's a new concept. In fact, people for ages have been working for it. Of course, you should appreciate Dr. Reem, what she said. Of course, there are paramount work which is basically being visible now in Dubai. Even Dr. Reem also said that even the government is also supportive. Absolutely, it is right. But what exactly I think is still lacking is the mindset, which basically people have to mature on. Because if you look into the diversity, more about talking about, we are also not, in one breath, we are talking about inclusion, because inclusion is kind of a glue which is holding both, diversity and maybe the, the equity of the people. Because if you don't have the inclusion in the team, then you cannot actually make the diversity really success. So I think that is what is a focus as a CHRO of a company. I always try to be a change leader. I always welcome the champions who can take the torch further and maybe bring the change for the community. I think one of such example which I can give you for DEI, we have been working recently in one of the African islands known as Fotoba. So it was basically a place which is a few kilometers away from Guinea. And that was a kind of a place which was mainly inhabited by people of fishing community. So they don't have any other, livelihood. So we went there as a part of a CSR activity, and we found that the people are living a very, miserable life, because if there is a good weather, they can do the fishing. Otherwise, they have to starve. So we were actually working on a project that how to, give them a food security or food sustainability. So we uh, try to welcome the women of the society, because we found that the women and the nature has a good combination. So when you talk about women, so women are known as their caregiver, but at the same time, the women and men can go parallelly to support this thing. And then we try to encourage the women to come into the agriculture, and we basically made it a success. I think it's almost 2 years now, and European Union also helped us for this particular project. So I think this is a wonderful initiative where we have seen diversity and inclusion is definitely required, but at the same time, how we are taking the gesture to reach out to the different, the communities. So it is not only limited within an organization, but also the, the people with whom we are working. Of course, the employees. So we have got 5,000 plus employees and 5,000 families. So the kind of culture which we show them is the something which also propagates back in their home. So I think that is where we all have to play a role of a change leader. So the more we really talk about our own responsibility, gradually it can multiply further to the, the distant communities. Maybe some of them are even as insignificant as a dot, but these dots can connect to, millions of dots, and this is how we touch lives. And probably this webinar is one such gesture.
Thank you, Professor Premankur. I think what you said is a very fundamental for diversity work. I think inclusion is a very key focus, and another great point. It can't be just within the four walls of the organization. How we sort of impact the community, involve the community, that where we do our own businesses and see how we can really do that. I think it also sort of rubs off on the at the corporate level level as well, because so the community is where you actually start your hiring, right? And if the community is truly appreciative of the diversity, truly appreciate and understand the inclusivity and inclusion, and when you hire from that particular community, I think there is a greater acceptance of the diversity, the diverse values we really want to, cherish in the organization, Professor Premankur. So we'll come back to you for your more thoughts in terms of how we can actually do this. I would love to go to Sheriza. Again, Sheriza, you had some great international experience. I think more than 22 years of experience in the space of HR and diversity. So how do you see this, the DA landscape in the Gulf, Sheriza?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Karthik. And it's such an honor to be here amongst all of you experts, Dr. Reem, Abigail, and Premankur. And thank you to all of you who have dialed in from across the world. And I am actually very new to the role of DEI. And one of the things that I have discovered in the last 6 months is the support and resources that's out there within the UAE and Abu Dhabi in particular. So I was very, very surprised to see the level of commitment of other women who have been passionate about the topic and the network that's available out there. So I think that says a lot around our commitment to diversity and inclusion. As you all know, UAE is a very tolerant country and we have all nationalities in the world. Everyone is welcome. So there is no short of cultural, racial experience, diversity in that space. There is no short of that. And I think like everywhere else in the world, we are committed to ensuring everyone feels safe and welcome. I think ultimately, whether you are youth, Emirati, man, woman, that's our ultimate goal to make sure that everyone has that psychological safety to come to work and to bring out their best every day. In the landscape of Etihad, I think we are paying a lot of attention to women, like everywhere else in the world, in certain roles, underrepresented roles, which includes leadership roles. We have also focused on our youth and our Emiratis, and also making sure that we have culture groups and minority culture groups that feel that they have a voice on the table. So it's just about making sure the inclusivity piece includes everyone. And while we are talking about inclusion, we have to be very careful that we do not take sides, like what Dr. Reem said. We're not in competition and we do not want any exclusive treatment, be it to the woman or to the Emiratis, but also making sure that we are including all of the other employee segments as well.
Yeah. Sheriza, thank you. How do we do this? In a sense, you spoke about how we can actually sort of build this entire aspect of inclusion. But I wanted to ask you as a follow-up question, Sheriza. In fact, in the conversation that we have had before, we were actually speaking about the entire aspect of how can we define diversity, equity, and inclusion for the organization, right? Because there is this larger definitions and meaning, and people understand it in different way. But each organization really sorts of need to be very precise. I'm saying this in terms of what is their focus, what is that they would like to sort of accomplish, and the progress that they really want to make with respect to DEI, Sheriza. So how do you really sort of, the fundamental question, do you think that we need to have a very clear, well articulated sort of what does DEI mean to my organization or the organization that I'm working in? And how do you do that? And what are some of the components that you really need to look at when you start defining that definition?
Yeah. So I mean, if you get down to the basics, if you want to be the best company for women and creating workplaces that foster equality and inclusivity, we first need to define what is the D, what is the E, what is the I, and what is the B in your organization and in the region. And what I love about this region is while we want to be the fastest, the tallest, the first, the largest, right? While we want to be transformative, we have to be very aware that in the Gulf region, we are very, very proud and very, very true to our traditions, right? So that is no given. So hence, while we are talking about DEIB, we need to exercise some kind of caution in the subject. Because when we look at the global landscape, there is talk around Black Lives Matters, there is talk about LGBTQ and how we are giving equal opportunities to refugees and to the Latinas. There's so many different things which I think the region is not ready for. I mean, even those pronouns behind your names, the he and the she and the they, there's no appetite for that here, right? It has not caught on. And while some organizations are trying that just because the rest of the world is doing it, there is no appetite for that here. So I think it is important for us to define that. And we are doing that here in Etihad Airways, trying to define what that means for us. We are very lucky that we've got some data to fall back on. So in our annual engagement survey. We have 5 questions around diversity and inclusion. And from there, we get to kind of pick and choose what is it that we want to focus on, and we make our definition based on that. And because we have the strong support from the government, those organizations that Dr. Reem is associated with, we also have to follow some of the mandate that's being driven by the government, right? And those mandates are around Emiratis, are around youth, are around women. But in the organization, we also try to be inclusive. Now, a great example that I can share with you is in Etihad earlier this year, we introduced a travel companion concept. And this is for those who are unmarried, right? So if you are married, you will get a travel entitlement for your spouse. But if you are not married, you are at a losing end because you only get travel entitlement for yourself. So in order for us to be inclusive with this subject, we introduce a travel companion. So single employees get to nominate one person, be it their parents, their siblings, their best friend, their partner, whoever it is, that they can identify as their travel companion. So this is one way of us trying to bring in inclusivity and making sure that every segment of the organization feels accepted and belong and seen in the organization.
Yeah, thank you, Sheriza. And I think what you mentioned is very important, right? When you really looking at defining diversity for the organization, right? We really look at what does D represents and means to us, what kind of values that really drive. Same thing with the equity part of it, because there's always this huge conflict or the conversation is around the entire aspect of equity versus equality, what is right, which is the best possible approach. And I think that is those clarity is something that we really need to do. Especially, and also what do inclusion, and inclusion can be so abstract. Diversity, at least you can say in terms of number, but how do you really define inclusion? It's just how people feel, right? Even the same thing with belonging, but you also need to sort of look at it and find ways of measuring them, right? And find ways of making people see this is what true inclusion is. And I think this is where the definition of all this actually becomes very important. I think, and you also made a great point. Sometimes it's not some great big initiatives as small. I'm not saying as small, but a simple initiative as the partner program that you spoke about, companion you spoke about. Simple things can actually make a huge difference in terms of inclusion, people feeling so much valued. Right, I could be a single person, but I'm still included as part of the program, is still valued, right? I'm not excluded from whatever that is happening. I think that's a great point, Sheriza. In the same context, Abigail, I just wanted to ask you, right, the way when you start off the program, you really need to look at the entire aspect of defining DEI for yourself. At the same time, Abigail, from your own experience, like you said, when you moved to Otis, there's not much of diversity there with respect to from a gender perspective, not enough women, and you have to start this ERG, right? So definitely there would be some of, I'm not talking about the challenges, but just the lack of numbers itself is a challenge, right? And specifically when you're starting a women ERG. So how do you do this? How did you manage to include people? And a very important aspect of this is also including the men, because there are more men now, right? In the Otis as an organization. And how did you sort of structure this, involve men in this entire aspect of looking at how do we start welcoming more women? And Abigail, one more thing, Otis, we know it's in engineering, it's not a typical tech company, right? There are a lot of challenges. It's just not the workplace. People are at the project sites. So your thoughts on experience of driving this, Abigail?
Yeah, sure. And I loved everything that Sheriza said and totally agree about the region and the way it works and their culture. And I think that's a really important one to think about when we start to think about the initiatives and the pace of change. So I'll hold that one. So I just want to go back to the kind of definition of DEI. We have a great director of DE&I in our organization, Alicia Smith. And she has a lovely statement that I always try to remember whenever I'm suggesting an initiative. And she says, diversity is inviting people to the party. Inclusion is about asking them to dance. And I think that's a really simple and memorable statement for us to think about for every initiative, are we being fully inclusive? So back to your question, it was it was rather a shock just to see how few women we had, and most of those women are in office roles. We do have some in slightly technical areas, but most of them are office-based. And thinking about that pace of change and wanting to take people along the journey with us, and also being very respectful to the amazing culture in the Middle East. The easiest thing was to take something that was meaningful and do it quickly. I'm very fortunate. I have a great managing director who is totally supportive and very honest. You know, when I asked him about creating a mother's room, we had 3 pregnant ladies all at the same time in the same office in Dubai. And again, put that together with very short maternity leave in the UAE. I approached him and said, can we, we've asked our colleagues, what do they need? And initially they need a space when they return to work to be able to express, store the milk, and then take it home to baby at the end of the day. And he said, I never even considered this was a need. He's so honest. He says that to the whole business. And I said to him, Mohammed, how did you not know this was a need? You have 2 daughters. And he said, because my wife took care of all that. It did not enter my head. And he said, please, if anything else comes up, please tell me. I will be behind it 100%. And he has been. And we put that room into place within 2 months before the first female colleague came back from maternity leave. They've all used it. One was a first-time mom, and she had actually said to me, I had no idea how I was going to cope, but when you put that in place, I knew I could cope. So that's been a huge success. But every initiative that we've done, we've always taken our male colleagues along with us. We always do a big celebration. The one thing I notice in this region is everybody loves food. So we always have cake. We always have an opening celebration. We invite everyone. So we make it inclusive, and we try to start the conversation around, we have lots of men. They're all in technical roles nearly. How we want this organization to be a place that you would be happy for your mother, for your sister, for your daughter to work in. So think about that. When you're looking at these initiatives, please don't think that we're ignoring you. What we're saying is we want to balance the books, balance the gender ratios, and make this a business that you would be happy for your daughter, your wife, your mother, your niece to work in. And then what we've also done with our initiatives is try to balance them across the genders. So, we did International Women's Day. Well, we did International Men's Day as well. And we took gifts. We usually use toolbox talks for our field employees that the supervisors give out information to keep them safe. This one was on mental health. So we gave them a toolbox talk to deliver to the field colleagues on mental health to fit with the theme of International Men's Day. We did Mother's Day. So we also did Father's Day, but we did it in a slightly different way. We asked them to provide pictures of their families, pictures of their children, because often, the guys in the technical role, their families may not be in Dubai. They may be in India. They may be in the Philippines. And we wanted to just help them realize that we are all a big family. We all support each other, and that this women's network is not just about women. And they really appreciated those little initiatives. They were surprised. My managing director was surprised that the Otis Women's Network was doing things specifically for men. But for me, this is about managing that change. Change is unpleasant for some people, and change often makes them feel excluded. So it's about deliberately including and always thinking about, I might have invited them to the party, but have I asked them to dance? And I just love that. I love that thought. And now, obviously, we're trying to get more women into the field using our STEM work, part of the ESG. And as part of the Emeritization program, I have an Emirati female who's she's an aerospace engineering graduate, but she's getting very interested in lift technology, getting her out on site. I'm absolutely determined to get her out on site working. She will be the first Emirati female field technician once we get her trained and in that space. So, and again, all of these things, it's about managing the change, managing the communication, and managing the pace so that it still fits with this wonderful culture and heritage that the Middle East has.
Great points, and two interesting things that struck me, Abigail. One is this entire aspect of, in the Women's Network Group, actually ERGs, celebrating the Father's Day, the International Men Day. So the ERG, the women ERG is actually inviting the men to dance with you. So
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
it's a very simple way of sort of including them, making them feel it well, and that's a great point, Abigail. And another point that struck me is, just go and ask. I think that's what you did, right? So people don't know sometimes, and sometimes we sort of criticize and think that's not happening. I think the simple thing is just ask. Sometimes it will get done. I think a very two takeaways for me from what you said, Abigail. Thank you so much. Professor Premankur, to you. While we were talking about the center aspect of defining DEI, we also look at, it need not be some very big bang initiatives. Some of the things that Sheriza and Abigail spoke about were simple steps that we could actually start off with, right? Yeah, there are a lot of things that we could do, but you could just start with very small initiatives, simple initiatives, which can actually make a big impact. Now, Premankur, when in this entire aspect of looking at this, and I think we also briefly touched upon this entire aspect of equity and equality, because when you do all these initiatives, right, then this aspect of equity and equality comes into play. Is it applicable to all? If it is not applicable to all, do we even do it? Right, we are an equal opportunity employer, or do we apply the equity lens to it? Your thoughts, Professor Premankur, the equity versus equality question.
Thank you for asking this question. In fact, it is one of the favorite topic of mine, which I always tirelessly keep speaking on. I think the biggest takeaway from what Ms. Abigail said or what Sheriza said, that of course small initiatives are really required. That is what again the management teaches us. If you go as per like the concept, of course the small steps can take you to the biggest leap. Of course, that is how things generally happen. But what I understand in the first place, where we miss out, we do not see the big picture. Is sometimes the people are not very clear about the concept of equity. People sometimes think that we have made things accessible to all. We have got equal opportunities. For example, there is a policy in most of the organization, that is EEO. Okay, so employee equal opportunities. So when we talk about employee equal opportunities, so we say that we have equal opportunities for people. We have raised bars, and we have tried to ensure that the best facilities are given to people of different backgrounds or different diversity. But ultimately, when it comes about ensuring the output, that when exactly we are talking about, we are really ensuring that the parameters or the yardstick which you have led, say for example, I can give recruitment as an example. So when we are suppose going for a C-suite positions, so of course I have seen that there is a tendency, even it can be in any organizations, they always prefer to have a male C-suite candidate and not a female C-suite candidate. Now, why this discrimination? So that is something which I often question myself and my people. So it's not that the people are not confident or they are not believing in the capacity of a woman, but it's also about the thought process from where we come, the mindset from where we come. This is the society where we, that is what Dr. Reem has also highlighted, what Abigail or Sheriza has highlighted, that we are living in a society which has already some predefined thought process. And if we are really not winning that thought process within ourselves, maybe even the small changes which we are talking about will not take us to that, the direction which we are intending to. So we have to really teach people about equity. Of course, inclusion is something which is definitely required in the first place, but I think we should stress more on equity. So it's not about that how much equality we are bringing in. Equality is just only making people level-headed. but also to make sure that the people from all backgrounds sometimes are not really equally defined in that way that they can really attain that success with that equal opportunity. Maybe some extra support is required. And that is where the employee resource group or maybe some other entities can bring up, which can connect the synergies. So the yardstick which should be there in all organizations, even which I also ensure, say I give an example which we recently did. We were recruiting for our global strategic and partnership head. So we found that at times maybe the women are much more mature in that role, because when it is talking about partnering with the new brands and taking the brand for a global perspective, we found that the women are more capable in doing that thing. But it's not only that. We have to always keep a thing in our mind that, the marketing or fulfilling some leadership position, it is only the male can do that. But sometimes we have to all make sure that these yardsticks are also helping them to fulfill those roles. So it could be how we can really raise the bar to give them that extra support. And that extra support which we are talking about, it is not actually making a compromise or any adjustment, but it is about to ensure that the output where we are talking about equality is met. So I think that is what would be my, take on this particular subject. And I'm sure like other panelists will also agree. If we really do not focus on the ultimate output, we will never be able to make sure that equality and equity are always at the two same levels, because equity is something which is more important than equality.
I think a great point, Premankur, because when you talk about this equity aspect of it, the question comes, where do you apply this? Do you apply this aspect of post-performance or before performance? I'm using the word before performance, which is what
I can give you a catch in that. In fact, this is a very good question. We generally make this DEI, however, this is at a very nascent stage in my organization. We have 5 company under our brand of Robustrade. We are into polymer, we are into automobile, we are into healthcare, we are into FMCG, as you rightly said. So there are many things, even into fintech as well. So whenever we are doing this induction, we keep DEI as the first step in the induction to tell them that what exactly we expect from you. So if you are really tomorrow going to refer somebody from a diverse background or from a different ethnicity, you are most welcome and you get an incentive for that. Second, when we are trying to take the person into the family, we are always ensuring that we are trying to show them that we are really welcome for people of any background and we are ready to even listen to you. So if you're really showing the respect to their ideas, no matter how much old they are into the team, but how much of how much concern you have for them, whether you are really patient to listen to them, that is very important. Many a times, even in my organization, I should not speak great, because since I'm in a forum, even in my organization, it happens that we are not hearing to the newbies. So it can happen. So, but when we are talking about equity, we should always empower of listening. So I think we are trying to embrace this DEI. We're trying to make sure that we are trying to bring this as a daily process. And of course, it feels like a quarterly process, which I would always suggest to evaluate your data, to evaluate your observations, so that constantly you can evolve. Because what exactly are your diversity or your equity priority will not be the same after 3 months. It will change, because as Sheriza said, that Etihad is a big organization, we all know. So they have got a good data. But imagine if a company like us, where we don't have so much of organized tool. So we are always every day evolving with new challenges. We are entering new markets. So we definitely have to make sure that we should do a constant follow-up. I think a follow-up audit, I should say. So audit is very important, so that we can audit on what exactly the data. So what exactly the ethnicity which we have, what are the diverse mix of our employees, what would be in the next 3 months, and whether there are attritions, and if attrition is happening, then what exactly the reasons. So that will further connect us to the fact that why people are even not satisfied. So if they are not satisfied, that could be even many reasons. Could be cultural reason, could be the existing practices in the organization which is not conducive enough for the new entrants to come. So I think it is a kind of hand-in-hand process, Mr. Karthik. So it's not like that we can just go on preaching about equity, and we never practice the same in our work, but we also have to keep on practicing. And we should also encourage that how we can regularly welcome people to share their ideas, and we can get in the data so that we move on to the next level.
Thank you. Thank you, Premankur. I think I was going to have the last question with respect to data and how data can be actually make a huge difference. We touched upon it. I think we'll come back to the part of the data towards the end of the discussion. Dr. Reem, while we are in a sequential manner looking at how do you start up this, how do you define, how do you do those small things, the simple stuffs that we really, how do you address the equity and equality issue subject, Dr. Reem? I think you with your experience in the corporate space, working in multiple organizations, multinational organizations, Dr. Reem, and now you're part of this at the Harvard Business School. You're also advisor to the government, both Dubai and Abu Dhabi, Dr. Reem. So, what do you think is the role of the society, the education institutions, and more specifically the government, and how can we really sort of this very successful collaboration, the private and the public, the government and the corporate sector? And how do you enable this, Dr. Lee?
Absolutely. Just before answering that, I just want to reflect on what Professor just said. Do you know what is the biggest population in India, the biggest community we have in the UAE? Do you know, Karthik?
Indians, Dr. Reem?
So, absolutely. So Indians and Pakistani represent 40% of the population of the UAE. UAE national represent 10%. We have traditions, cultural background that is different, right? You have the Indian Pakistani community, you have the UK community, and what is important to address is everyone is now coming in this melting pot that we call the UAE. And what is important is everyone is also coming with his own bias, conscious and unconscious. And the idea is how we work together in one society and we basically overcome those biases. I'll give you one simple example. As a mom, I have 3 children, right? And it happened in my career when I had, I think, my second one of my boss, it was coming really from a nice feeling, a protective feeling, right? He said, I'm not giving you that big project. It's 3 years in Singapore. You need to go back and forth from France to Singapore, to Hong Kong, to India. So I know you have a small baby, so I will not even propose you the project because probably you need to stay next to your baby. And I was like, what? Why? I want the project. It's very exciting. It was for Singapore airport, actually. I was like, no, I want it. And he said, yeah, but you just had a baby. I said, it's not for you to decide for me. And that's a key point. People needs to respect the choice of the woman. So just to be very clear, in the UAE, we have 2 genders. Okay, we are not yet ready for the other genders yet, right? So we spoke only about he and she. Right? Because I heard earlier talking about LGBT, we are not ready for that conversation yet, right? So when we talk, and it's already difficult to work with he and she, because he and she have multiple colors, because we have multiple nationalities, and we are one of the most international country in the world. The local population represent less than 10%. So 90% of our population are expats, and it's really important that we find a way to work together, and this is why bias is the number one thing that we need to talk about, and how we work in the same framework or try to have the same mindset or try to have the same point of view or angle of view, right? To understand what is expected from a society, to live in peace and to work well together. Because at the end, I'm coming from a PhD in economy. So really the key point for me is the GDP, direct and indirect. And it's wonderful basically to see how the UAE successfully show a way that everyone work here in peace and in respect of each other, which is absolutely important. So yes, the government, public and private sector are working together. As a Harvard Business School alumni, we've been working as well with the support of our organization, but has a link between the public and private sector. So the government is relooking at policy. There is 2 quotes that I want to share today with you. So in one of my meetings, I had the amazing chance to meet the Prime Minister of this country, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, and he said, our policies are not Quran, we can change them. So what is absolutely astonishing in the UAE is the government work in a very agile way. It's like a business on his own, right? So if a policy is not working, we have this meeting, we bring the right people around the table, we discuss them, and then we go back with a proposal. And if the government said, yeah, it's good, so the next day it will be adopted and signed, which is absolutely amazing, because try to go and change a policy in France, it will take you 20 years probably to be able to get something signed and applied. So this is one thing that is absolutely astonishing. So we are able to push the needle. We are able to have access to our own leadership to do some changes. And one of the big change, it was a big win actually for us in the last 15 months, was a policy that came out for women representation in boards. So initially, the law came out with a mandatory Emirati woman, but because we are lacking of women in leadership as Emiratis, and we believe that talent is talent after all, and all women deserve a place, a seat to the table, they removed that requirement in terms of nationality. So now there is still this quota around having a woman part of the board, but it's not required anymore to be an Emirati woman. There is also a requirement, especially in Abu Dhabi, where a government entity needs to report around some KPIs related to women representation. So being a former Etihad myself, I know that Etihad was basically sharing with the government body some KPIs around how many women we have in the task force, how many women has crew in the leadership, etc. So it is required by the government for different entities here. It's mandatory to show that representation, and to show as well an improvement, because there is also some goals that have been set up by the government, and the idea is really to show basically the improvement, and showing also that the pyramid of those women will progress with time in their career, like from management to leadership, etc., and to board members. So it is important that we track those KPIs. It's not perfect, right? It's a learning journey at the end of the day. So it's a collaboration between public, government bodies and other organizations like the Harvard Business School Club, where we try basically to improve, and we try to learn from our mistakes as well, and try to change the policy to make it easier for the organization and easier and better for our government. One of the policy I'm currently actively working on is maternity and paternity leave policy for the government of Abu Dhabi. So there is some change that are coming up. Just a heads up, Sheriza. Some changes that are coming up in the government. We are actively basically discussing and benchmarking what is happening around maternity, paternity leave policy across the globe. And the UAE want to set, again, the example. So this is what is absolutely astonishing, you know, in the UAE is the UAE want to lead the path around sustainability. We are a government that is really relying on oil economy, and we are shifting the needle to non-oil. At the same time, we know that we are not perfect in around diversity and inclusivity. So again, we are trying to do our best to push the needle. And to quote, another quote that I wanted to share with you is the quote of our founding father, the late Sheikh Zayed Al Nahyan. He said, "Nothing could delight me more than to see the woman taking up their distinctive position in society. Nothing should hinder her progress. Like men, women deserve the right to occupy high position according to their capability and qualification." And I have to say, honestly, I have to admit that I felt that clearly since 2015 when I came back to the UAE as an advisor with my 20 years of consulting background. I always had a seat around the table. His Highness called me Doctora, even if I see him like a father figure, right? So I always like, you know, you are humbled by such amazing example in terms of leadership. And I'm always basically feeling like so small next to His Highness. And he always called me Doctora and giving me the value because of my skill set, my capability, my experience, and the fact that I was educated and coming from Harvard, which they value a lot. Here in the UAE, and it was absolutely astonishing. And I can see the same path coming as well in Saudi. Actually, Saudi is also learning a lot from the UAE. I've been basically involved as well in some policy making in the Saudi side of things, because as a lead sustainability, I represent not only the UAE, which is my country, but also the GCC. So we are supporting basically also the government of Saudi, and they are basically trying to catch up around those topics. But again, if you look as well in terms of during the next 20 years, the definition of society in the UAE changed. Initially, it was really UAE national focused. Today, when we talk about the community in UAE, we spoke about community, including the expats, because they are part of the society. And one big step that was taken by the government to let them feel that we want them not only just to come for a few years and leave, we want them actually to stay, to invest, to have their kids raised and go to our schools, is the golden visa. Right? So the golden visa now is a visa that is not linked to any working contract. So people have a 10-year visa in the UAE. It's not really difficult, basically, to get. And the next step probably that is coming soon is naturalization.
Okay. So good to know, Reem. I think you gave some insights to what we can look for in the UAE. So thanks a lot. And Dr. Reem, one interesting that you spoke about, I think the role of leadership is very important, right? And both at the private sector, at the corporate, the leaders play a huge role in terms of what they can do. And Dr. Reem, certainly at the government level.
The government play a role of inertia. It's like they push, they create the push, they create the inertia, and everyone needs to follow the movement.
Yeah.
And this is where what is amazing is everyone is part of it. We are one society. We have this feeling of inclusion in the UAE. All the expats can basically, I probably have bias here. I probably have my own bias, but people can basically talk about it. If you look, one example that I love, honestly, is when we have the National Day. Nothing makes me more happy than the period around National Day. It's absolutely amazing in Abu Dhabi. And you can see all those expats like talking about Sheriza, how the UAE is really inclusive, how the UAE is so peaceful and respectful of people coming from different country of the world, different religion, different place. And how people also play the game dressing as Emiratis and trying to learn about our culture. It's absolutely amazing and really basically something that I cherish every year, to be honest.
Thank you. I
just would like to come in to just compliment Dr. Reem, what she said. I think, this global community is all about ICT. So how we are bringing innovation, collaboration in one place and how we transform. So I think it's all about that. So, and Dubai and GCC is the best example for that. So thank you, Dr. Reem, for highlighting the
absolutely, Professor. And as I mentioned before, I was working as well for government bodies in Europe and Asia. And for example, I worked in India, and I know there is a lot of people connected from India. You have no idea how difficult it is to change a policy in India. How many people we need to bring on meetings basically to change a single small thing, right? You probably have this experience too. Here in UAE, it's very agile. And this is what is outstanding. Exactly. You will have basically His Highness on a Teams call, on a Zoom call with you. You will present your PowerPoint like you are presenting to your line manager. And then he will say, okay, good. Okay, so you work with this guy. They will prepare the policy. The next day it's signed. On Sunday, it's published on the national. So this is what is outstanding. And no country in the world is able to do that except, thankfully, the UAE.
Thank you, Dr. Reem. As I said, gave some very wonderful insights to this entire the discussion in terms of what we expect from the country. In the final question that I really wanted to ask with respect to the data that we actually wanted to speak about, I think Dr. Reem, you alluded to that. Professor Premankur spoke about it. You spoke about the benchmark. So, Sheriza, over to you. In terms of how do you think a study like the Best Companies for Women, or any study for that matter, can really, and because what we are talking about, the data tracking, the impact that really can actually sort of help us see where we are going, the progress that we are really making. How do you think some of these could really help in the overall strategy in terms of plus the tactical aspect of driving DEIB, Sheriza. Your thoughts, the importance of data and benchmarking.
Yeah, so one thing I learned in creating the DEI strategy in Etihad, in my new role, was that data is power. I would bring in so many different proposals, so many best practice, what other organizations are doing. And I would always get a pushback to say, but what does that mean to Etihad? Why do we need to do that in Etihad? And that was one of the things that I learned. So from the employee engagement survey, we got the data that we wanted. And what we found in all the 51 questions was that the females have scored low. Some are very insignificant in the gaps, but there are some significant ones. So that is a good indication for us. And based on that, we have a baseline. We looked at the areas that we wanted to focus on, and that's how we created our KPI. We have external partners that we have benchmarks with, global benchmark, regional benchmark with other government entities, as well as with the aviation. So we partner with 2 external bodies that give us that benchmark. And based on those benchmarks and those internal data that we have, we create our KPI. The other thing that we did, and I think this was highlighted by Premankur earlier, was that we embed the DEI practices into our daily governance. So, for example, we make sure that we have DEI questions in all our survey. We make sure that it is in our recruitment, our onboarding, our leadership and manager effectiveness, and in our performance conversation, because this is where that one-on-one interaction takes place. This is where the individuality comes out. This is when line managers and leaders make the employees feel safe and heard and welcome. So this is how we are integrating DEIB into our daily practices rather than making it a one-off initiative. So it is, we want to make sure my goal is achieved as a human being, not as a lead in Etihad. I feel my goal is achieved when DEI initiative is felt by each and every employee.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's not a HR responsibility. It is everyone's responsibility, and it should be felt.
Yeah. Thank you. Abigail, would you like to share your thoughts in terms of the data and benchmark, and specifically to organizations? And Otis, I'm sure there's a lot of work happening. I'm talking about Otis in the Gulf, where the entire aspect of diversity is probably in the initial stages, Abigail, at least from a numbers perspective and what you're trying to do. How can the data and benchmarks be a big differentiator?
I think it's crucial. And actually, an example from earlier this year in February, when going back to Dr. Reem talking about policies, you can always change a policy. And we wanted to change our maternity leave policy to go beyond what the law requires. And I was taking into account 5 countries in the Middle East, all of whom have different laws. And I wanted it to be a win for each one. And one thing I wanted to do as part of the business case was to have some benchmarking data from other companies. And I realized that we're only coming out of the woods of not being willing to share what we do between each company. So the benchmarking data was not readily available. Even in Otis, it's difficult because, again, each country has its own laws and we tend to do what the law requires. So I think it has a value, but I didn't let it stop me, the fact that I didn't have that data. I looked at the 5 countries. I took the amount of legal requirement for each country, and we increased it. And the UAE won big there because the UAE started with the smallest amount. It was 45 days, and we've increased it to 90 days paid leave, which for somebody from the UK is still only small. But I go back to what I said earlier, the pace of change has to be right for this region. We can't run before we walk. Making those small but impactful changes is critical. And as I say, when I speak to my global DEI colleagues and I talk about what we've done in this region, I always say that some of the initiatives that we've done here are more impactful to this region than they would be anywhere else. But it has to be the right pace of change. And I think getting that data is really important, and our willingness to share some of that data, not only internally, but externally with other companies, is what is going to enable us to be able to raise that bar, because, you know, inherently we're all quite competitive, and we probably all want our companies to attract the best talent, right? So you can only do that if you can see what others can offer. And I always say I want Otis to be the employer of choice in this region. I'm sure everybody on the panel feels the same about their companies. So the only way you can do that is to see what you offer and to offer something more. I think a point that Dr. Reem made, I just wanted to comment on, and I think at the risk of being controversial, she's totally correct that, you know, LGBTQ, the different genders, that's a space that the region is not ready for. I think there's definitely an opportunity for people with my background to contribute to that discussion, because I can tell you from where I've come from in the UK, my personal view is that they've made those changes too quickly. They've had disadvantages. They have excluded people. And I think we have an opportunity to learn from that in the Middle East, and to learn not what to do, but what not to do. So I, as much as we want to be inclusive, we always have to be respectful of the culture that we're in and the cultural history that's there, and take the best of what's on offer, but learn from where maybe it hasn't been done so well. And maybe it's been done too quickly. But I can tell you, you know, from the UK, there are a lot of people that feel excluded from those activities because of the way they've been done, because of the speed of that change, and because they didn't really understand the impact on everyone. So I think there's a real opportunity for us to share those experiences and learn from them so that we don't make those mistakes.
Dr. Reem, you raised your hand.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted basically to just clarify something, because yes, indeed, it's not a topic. Meanwhile, it doesn't mean they do not exist or we just put them on the side. I personally have a lot of friends here in the UAE that are part of the LGBTQ, and the voice that we are hearing is more about Emiratis that are part of the LGBTQ community, I would say. And what they raise most of the time is, I don't want different right than my right as a citizen. So why we should even basically look after my sexual preferences? It's not your business. So this is where we are, and really we don't want to segregate them, because we believe that putting the light on them will somehow put them in a corner somehow, you know, like it's in Europe, like why we should highlight them because they have different tastes. I mean, they are part of the society, that's it. So this is how we see it today. Maybe it will evolve over time, right? And maybe they will come up with discrimination later on, because as I mentioned, people are also coming with their own bias in the society of UAE. But right now, we don't see, or we don't feel there is a need to address anything, because they need to have the same right than any other citizens. And we should not segregate them because of sexual preferences or difference. So it's up to them. What they are doing in private is their own business, and it's not for us basically to judge it. They are absolutely equal. Just I wanted to make it precise.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we need to be, I think Abigail said and everyone said, we also need to be respectful for the culture, the tradition. And I think that is very, very important. As much as you're talking about the entire aspect of diversity and inclusion, I think that is very key, the long tradition and the culture. And that is something that we really need to be respectful of and
Absolutely.
see how we can do that. And I think we had some great discussions. Thanks a lot for your time. We have come. In fact, we could go on and on. There's so much that we could actually hear from you. And I think there was a question, I think, Dr. Reem, that you already addressed that question with respect to the Emirati thing. And in fact, one example that you gave, sort of, I think also addressed that, which is now you're now ensuring that women on board is is open to all nationals. It's just not from Emirati. I think that's a great example in terms of how you are really looking at this, the equity as equality. I think wonderful discussion. As I said, we could go on and on. We just, I think, effectively crossed.
I think
6:30.
one
Yeah.
final
if
thing I
Karthik-
just wanted to say as a theme for all, that we should believe in Kaizen, that we should make small changes and constant changes will bring us the change which we're all looking for. So Kaizen should be the bottom line. And, we should think global, but again, act local. That is what should always bring the uniformity in our existence, because this gesture is wonderful. This BCWG, this entire initiative where Avtar is really commendable, and we are looking forward for such initiative in future also. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you
if
to
you
all.
allow me,
Please,
Karthik,
please,
I
please,
just
Dr.
wanted to raise last point as well, and it's specifically for the ladies. You don't need SDGs, DEI, or any of those framework in reality for empowerment. You empower yourself. They're like the HR and all those framework are here to help and support you. Meanwhile, to basically raise your hand to have a project, move forward in your career, take a step forward. It's for you to do it. Do not expect anyone to do it for you, right? You empower first yourself, and then you will have the support from HR, the SDGs, and all of that is toolbox. But empowerment comes from you first.
Absolutely. And on that very powerful note, Dr. Reem, and to all our wonderful panelists today, I think it's been one of the very exciting, entertaining, and insightful panel. Thanks a lot for your time. We look forward to stay connected with you and all those people who have joined us today. And feel free to write to us anything with respect to DEI, and more specific with respect to how can you be part of this, the best company for India, for women in the Gulf study. Would be very happy to help you out and share our experiences and how it can really benefit the organization that we're participating. Thanks once again, and look forward to connecting with you all soon in various other sort of focus that we have for the Gulf, in terms of this is probably the 4th or the 5th webinar that we really conducted. We had some great different diverse panelists coming, different companies sharing their thoughts, and we would be doing more of things, and would welcome to love to see you all again. Thank you so much.